John, we've had several attorneys who have been on the podcast with us, and I think Lewis is the most dynamic, and he has so many quotable quotes in here. And the way he prepares his mindset, it's clearly part of who he is and how he coaches attorneys and service-based industries on how to do what he knows how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Louis is also a two-time author. He wrote the book, It Has to Hurt, which talks about entrepreneurial failure and rising from that and growing. And also one that I think will be really appealing to our entrepreneurial guests, King of Growth, really how to achieve wealth and freedom through the creation and growth of your business with 9 pillars, 9 essentials, and 9 principles. Here is Louis Scott. Today's episode is being brought to you by Financial Wing. Are your company's financials keeping you up at night? We all know that today's small to medium-sized businesses often overlook the fundamentals of accounting and financial operations. Our friends at Financial Wing can help with everything from bookkeeping, monthly closing and reporting, budget planning, and much, much more. Financial Wing's reliable and professional approach will quickly build your trust and turn your finances into an asset versus a liability. Go to financialwing.com/EU for your free 30-minute consultation and see what they can do for you. Louis, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us this morning. I know you have a book. You run a firm called 8-Figure Firm Consulting, which to me automatically piques my interest to be like, okay, you seem to be growth oriented. On the same token, you have a law background, right? So if you can, please tell us, what do you do today as a profession and where's your expertise as it relates to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I don't know if anybody else has that kind of like background, but I love starting companies. I'm a starter by nature, and I love starting companies and then being able to give that to someone else to do. A little fun fact that many people don't know about me is that I actually owned a barber shop. I don't know anything about cutting hair, but I went in on a barber shop and then transitioned it over to my business partner at the time. So I love starting companies. I've started over 10 companies. But what really gave me a lot of passion was the legal space. And so in addition to owning a law firm, I also own a consulting business where I help law firms and entrepreneurial type lawyers build and scale their businesses. Because unfortunately, you go to law school and you learn the law, but you don't learn how to run a business. And running a business and being a good lawyer are two very different things. So right now, I spend the majority of my time both building my law firm, but also helping other people build theirs as well.
You find is most surprising for lawyers about running a business?
I think the most surprising thing is that the culture's really shifted. And what I mean by that is that there was a time period where being a good lawyer was enough. Like all you had to do was be a good lawyer. If you build it, they will come. If you're a good lawyer, they will come. But the space has become so competitive, and I believe it's catching up to what I call traditional businesses. For a long time, law firms were not traditional businesses. They did not have the same marketing opportunities that other businesses had because the bar, whatever state you're in, dictates how you can market, dictates how you can actually reach a customer or a client. And so many people just relied on this referral-based business to grow their practice. And what we're finding now is as more law firms are becoming more savvy in marketing, that it's become difficult to really compete in the space if you're not good at marketing. So I think a lot of lawyers fail to market properly. And for that reason, they don't have the reach and awareness that they need to scale their business.
Say they fail to market properly. What is proper marketing?
I think for me, marketing is all about creating awareness. And I have a funnel that I teach, which starts with creating awareness. Awareness will eventually develop leads, and leads are qualified buyers of your product. And then leads will develop into sales opportunities, and sales opportunities will develop into clients, eventually into work requiring people, and so forth. But I think that when you don't create the right type of awareness of your brand, it's very hard to attract a client to your business. And I think this is really relevant to any kind of service-based business or really any kind of product business. The brand is the most important part of marketing properly. It's how much you spend in marketing. It's what kind of brand do you have? What kind of client do you need to attract? And then what kind of promise are you making to them to entice them to want to hire you? And I think that many lawyers, they fail to do that. They just don't understand the concepts of marketing.
So creating a brand in the legal space, I'm not sure I know of a ton of legal brands. I know of some that have a catchy tune, or they hired William Shatner to hop on and say, you should use them, or that type of thing. Outside of hiring William Shatner or having a really catchy, corny tune, how does an attorney create a brand that is memorable and meaningful to the consumer?
In the legal space, especially like what we do, which is personal injury type of law, it's really become a commodity, right? And so it's hard to differentiate yourself when you are a commodity. You can go to any lawyer. The perception is you can go to any lawyer and they're going to get you a similar result. And the question is, what is the price point for each lawyer? But I think developing a brand is all about developing yourself as the central focus of your law firm, developing who you are as the central focus of your business. And I think when you look at some of the major companies out there, they're all built around a central person. You think about Tesla, you hear Elon Musk. When you think about Apple, you think about Steve Jobs. When you think about Home Depot, you sometimes think about the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, Arthur Blank, who's he used to be the founder of Home Depot. So there's always like this central figure that revolves around whatever business or product that you're selling. When you think about a TV show, many times these TV shows are, especially in the political sector, if you go to CNN or Fox, you think about the personality that drives that brand. And to establish yourself as a brand is to establish yourself as an individual. What do you stand for? What are the values that you stand for? What's the vision of your company, of your law firm? What's the mission that you have? How is it that matters to the client? And how do you communicate that to the client? And one of the biggest brands out there in the legal space is Morgan and Morgan, right? If you think about John Morgan from Morgan and Morgan, he's in I don't know, 20 states and billion-dollar law firm. He has a brand that says, I think, size matters. That's his slogan. And so brand is about, it's communicating who you are to the consumer and hoping that who you are and the values that you share and the mission that you have and the vision that you have resonates with people in a way that they say, I want to work with that company. I want to work with that law firm because it's going to benefit me and it's going to benefit whatever problem that I have. They're going to be able to solve that problem. So I think that's what building a brand is when it comes to the legal space.
Wait, Louis, I just want to make sure I'm capturing this right. So you have your own firm, which is a personal injury firm with a pretty sizable firm from what I can tell. In addition to that, you have a lot of entrepreneurial roots and experiences. So you mentioned you help entrepreneurs grow and scale. And what you and Rich have been talking about specifically to lawyers and their marketing plans. So is your target niche specifically helping lawyers grow and scale or businesses grow and scale in general? Is it very specialized?
Yeah. So my passion is entrepreneurs in general. Like I just love general entrepreneurship. The business, 8-Figure Firm Consulting, does help specifically lawyers. And recently we got into the space of like tax and tax accounting firms. They've started to hire, and we have a couple of those who have hired, because I think the rules and the principles apply to any service-based business. Now, I've never applied these rules to a product-based business, so I'm not really sure if they would apply, although I think that principles are principles and they work universally. But right now, the success that we're having in growing and scaling businesses is generally the service-based business, specifically the law firms, and now some tax accounting firms who are hiring us. But yeah, our focus is with 8-Figure Firm is law firms.
Okay. So you also have a book or multiple books. I know you have King of Growth, and I also see here, if I believe, It Has to Hurt. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I wrote the King of Growth. It's essentially a marketing book. It outlines the 9 pillars of marketing that I believe can help any service-based business grow. But it's how to dominate your market and create predictability for personal and financial freedom. That's the subtitle of the book. Like, I want people to view their business as an opportunity to create passive income. For a long time, people thought that the only way to do passive income was like to invest in some sort of stocks or to have real estate. But I believe that your business can actually create passive income for you. You could have a business that, if developed correctly and then handed over to the right leadership team, could continue to operate and run for you without you having to do much work. And then the It Has to Hurt book was a book that I wrote 3 years ago and finally published about a month ago. And it's really my journey of life and entrepreneurship, because I detail a lot of failures in there. And both of those, both life and entrepreneurship, are about trials and failures and shortcomings and things you have to overcome. And I've had a lot of those failures. And what I realized at the end of it is that life has to hurt, because like it's in that pain that we make transitions. It's in the pain that we actually improve our lives. And so that's what the purpose of that book was.
Love it. Okay. So you're speaking my language on both of those. I want to dive a little bit deeper into one, and maybe I'll allow Rich to dive into the other. 9 pillars that can basically help you create the wealth and freedom you want from having a passive business investment. Right up my alley. I actually have a book coming out later this year that speaks very similarly to minus 7 principles of entrepreneurial success, but it really plays to how can you build the business of your dreams without feeling like you have to be the chef, cook, and bottle washer working 80 hours a week in your own business. There's a
Right.
lot of principles there. One of the things that Rich and I have a hard time with is when someone says, I got 9 pillars or I got 5 tips or whatever, is to not ask, okay, our listeners want to know, give us a little bit of a taste of that. What are the 9 pillars? If you just had to give us like a little bit of a framework here.
So the pillars are divided into several categories, but generally speaking, the pillars of marketing. So I actually have something, and I have a webinar on this called the 999 plan. So that's the plan that I created, and it's 9 principles, 9 essentials, and 9 pillars. And the 9 pillars of marketing is the third bucket that you have to be engaged in order to create this predictability. But the first part of the pillars is having a well-developed customer journey. And I think that what people don't do, there's a company out there that does this absolutely phenomenally. It's a product-based company called Adidas, right? They have the most amazing customer journey. If you land on their page somehow, they're going to give you all kinds of ads retargeted to you throughout every social media platform. Anything you can look up anything online, and they have ads retargeting to you. And then once you, and this is something that I learned that Adidas does, once you actually purchase their product, they will then share those ads with people that you are in connection with. That's part of the customer journey, is guiding us all together. So that way we all feel like we're all getting Adidas. And I think that the first part of the first pillar in the 9 pillars is having a customer journey that guides people intentionally through the process, from the moment that they hear of you to the time that they become a client and beyond. And so that's pillar number 1, is well-defined, intentional customer journey. So that way there's intentionality. There's nothing worse than not knowing the experience that the client is going to get. And all too often, entrepreneurs believe that hiring people will deliver the exact level of quality service that they did when they were the grinder, right? When they were baking the cakes. And so they say, if I baked cakes before and then I hire someone to bake cakes, they're going to give the same quality and experience to the client. And that's not the case. If you're not intentional about it, they will deliver up to their standard. They will deliver up to their personalized expectation. And so I think pillar number 1 is having a customer journey that everyone, when you step out of the business and you're no longer involved, everyone knows this is the level of service, this is the quality, and this is the kind of service that we're going to provide to the client. The second pillar is actually a triple prong pillar, which is your referrals. And this is in the service-based business specifically. You want to have referrals from people who are in your industry. So for me, I'm a personal injury lawyer, but I don't do family law. I don't do criminal law. I don't do immigration law. I don't do estate planning. I should be developing referrals from law firms that do things that I don't do. So that's a very important thing. And many times lawyers, they're terrible about this. They don't actually reach out to any lawyers that they know. They graduate with 200 people, and yet they've never even talked to a single person since they graduated. Meanwhile, I've kept in touch with dozens upon dozens of people I've graduated with who send me cases on a consistent basis. So having a referral pipeline from lawyers. The second place is having a referral pipeline from people who are non-lawyers. So maybe these are people who are insurance agents, or they're my barber, or someone who I work with, a banker, who may be able to send me a case that they have. And then the third pillar is clients. And this is an important part that I think a lot of people miss. And that is that the best way to get a client referral is to ask. And so many of us are so scared to ask for a client referral. Like, just ask for a referral. Ask for somebody to send you a client. And I learned this technique because my sister-in-law actually sells Tom James suits. They're custom suits. And at the end of the conversation, she always says, hey, can you pull out your phone and give me 3 to 5 people who would look great in one of our suits? And she's asking for a referral. And so I would go through, I'd give her the 5 people, and she's responsible for calling them. And what's interesting is if you do that every time, you get 3 to 5 referrals every time, you can really grow your business. So that's 4 of the 9 pillars when it comes to marketing.
Got it. I wanted to come back. Your 999 plan was 9 principles,
9 essentials,
9 essentials, and
and
9
pillars.
and 9 pillars. Got it. Okay, interesting. And so in this book, which if I understand correctly, you have that book available now, or some of our listeners can go grab. Where would they go to grab that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can just email me at luis@eightfigurefirm.com, and I'd be more than happy to send them a free copy. So if anybody wants to pick up that book, I'm happy to send a free copy.
Oh,
Lewis,
great.
I have a
Thank you
question for you on the principles. Can you talk about what is the process that you used to distill to the principles, and how did you come to that there were 9 and there weren't 7, and what makes a principle?
Yeah, honestly, all of this happened organically. I was when I was thinking about what is the best way to teach something. I view myself as a teacher today. I spend a lot of hours creating content. I needed to create a formula for developing content in an easy way. And one of the best ways to teach something is to make it catchy, right? Or make it easier for people to remember. So this was actually my director of operations for Eight Figure Firm. She says, we need to have this many principles and this many essentials. And so we were just brainstorming. And honestly, I just looked up all kinds of principles, essentials, and pillars of marketing, and started deciphering what had worked for us and what it was that I felt were essential, like what they needed to exist in order for your business to run. Now, I know that 27 things is very bulky. That's a lot of things, but some of them are very small. Like one of the principles is having a well-defined vision statement. Like you have to have a vision statement. If you don't have a vision statement, then it's very likely that you can't really build your company in a meaningful way. And so the formula for it was just, it was more or less, I was trying to find something that was catchy. And then I thought about the things that I knew existed in my law firm that worked. And I thought about the things that I taught other law firms that needed to happen. And it just happened to come out to 9 things. And then that's how I developed that. And I was like, the 999 plan, that's the way we were going to get people to remember what you needed to have in your business.
What's the difference between a principle, an essential, and a pillar?
So for me, a pillar is a foundational piece. It's like you have to have these things. Those 9 things, if you don't have them, it's hard to scale your business. So for me, the pillar was like a foundational piece. An essential was something you have to have, but if you don't, it's essential for your business to grow and scale, but it doesn't hold up your business. See, the 9 pillars holds up your business growth because it's marketing related. The 9 essentials is you should have this for good leadership, and you need to have this. And without it, it's very likely that you're not going to have an essential item in your business. So an essential item for your business would be a business plan. That's an essential item for your business. If you don't have it, you could probably still build a business, but you're not going to have good leadership across a scaling business because you don't have essential things in your business. But it's not a foundational thing. It's not holding up your business. The marketing is. And the principles were concepts and ideas that a lot of times people forget, and they go, I'm not really sure. Do I need a vision statement? Do I need a vision statement? Do I need core values? Like those were the principles that you should have in your business. So your guiding principles were the things that guided your business. The essentials were the things that you could pass on to all of your employees, essential items you could pass on, your hiring plan, marketing plan, business plan, budget, company goals, initiatives. You could pass that on to people, but they weren't foundational. And then the marketing pillars were, if you don't have these things, it's going to be very hard to grow. So that was how I distinguished between the 3 types.
I hear you. I have a question on if a business plan is an essential but not a pillar. Like I could see people debating that and saying, actually, isn't having a business plan a pillar? How would you say you have a solid foundation with your pillars, but you don't have a business plan? So what would you say to somebody who would just want to debate where these items belong as to whether they are in fact foundational, or are they would nice to have? Or
I love that question, by the way, because it actually takes me to something that I heard a long time ago. And that's, you have to state a position, and then you have to live and die on that hill. And so for me, I don't actually even debate it. If somebody says it needs to be a pillar, I said, absolutely, just have it. That's my response. If you think it should be a pillar, or you think it should be an essential, or you think it's a principle, that's fine. I created the 999 plan. There's no reason to debate it. Let's just have it all. Let's have all 27 things, and then you're going to be able to grow your business. I love that question because there are things that I've positionally stated when I grow my business. Like one of the things that, especially in the personal injury space, is I say that people can't work from home. I don't think that people work effectively from home. Now, somebody could debate that, and that's totally fine. Like I'm fine debating that if you want to, but there's no need to debate that. That's my position. That's the way that I think the business should run. There may be somebody else who has another plan where working from home works for personal injury lawyers. I don't know anybody who's actually in that camp, but I think that you just have to kind of state a claim and live by it, die by it. And to the extent that any of the things that I've outlined end up not being correct, the beauty of these kind of plans is you can always pivot and you can say, you know what, I've realized that one of the foundational principles is a business plan. I learned that in another book. And so now I'm revising the pillars. So there's always opportunity to revise. But I do agree that there could be absolutely room to have more foundational principles, and it would mess up my 999 plan if I did that. So it would have to be something else, like a 7-10-9 plan. I don't know, but yeah, you could absolutely debate that could be a foundational thing. For me, it wasn't foundational because there are so many successful businesses that have never written or even looked at a business plan. So I found that if you could build a successful business without having that in a service-based business, I don't know product business that well, but if you could have a successful business without it, then it wasn't a foundational concept. So that's how I derived that.
Thank you. Your book, It Has to Hurt. Why did you select to teach things in that book around failures specifically?
For me, entrepreneurship is all about failure. I believe that our life is just a constant series of failures that we either fall on or that we get up from. And for me, my story was I kept falling through these failures. And it wasn't until I decided that I was no longer going to let that dictate my life and I was going to rise from it that my life really started to turn around. I had about 8 business failures that didn't work. I had relationships that failed. I had opportunities that failed, investments that failed. And it was every lesson that I learned from that finally allowed me to rise. I really wanted just to give people hope. There's so many people who are feeling hopeless. And we know this, the statistics show that there's many entrepreneurs or even non-entrepreneurs who are just feeling hopeless about their future and about whether their future can be better than someone else, because we're obviously in this comparison game due to social media. And I wanted to give people hope that you could lose a lot, but as long as you never gave up, that you could rise from that. And so I focused on the failures, but in every chapter, I put something I learned and what you can do to get yourself to recover from those failures. And that was something that was important for me, is I wanted to make sure it was actionable at the end of every chapter, not just a sob story about things that I had failed on.
I find it interesting. The title is very catchy. Obviously, it has to hurt, because obviously our nature is, well, maybe it shouldn't have to. Maybe there's a way to do this where it doesn't have to hurt, which in a way, the king of growth, your 9 pillars, if you do it this way, maybe you'll have success and it doesn't have to hurt. So there's some lessons there, but there is a lot of truth to, and we keep seeing it over and over again. And the stories of the gateway to success is through learnings, and learnings happen through failures. And that's just the way it goes. But yet we stigmatize a little bit failure, right? And when people are in it, and you mentioned there's a little bit of a crisis of people feeling a little bit helpless or hopeless. And this book hopes to show them that there's a way. What else can we be doing as leaders, as entrepreneurs, to try and make sure it doesn't have to hurt that much? Is it a mental preparation thing? Is it more education? I know you say you're really into the education space today, to be able to show pathways to success. What do you think is the key? Or do you think it's just a fact of life? People are going to fail and some people are going to pick themselves back up and some people aren't.
I think it's a yes to both questions and statements you've made. Yes, there's a way to streamline and to prevent some of the pain and the hurt. But I do think that there's some things that you can do to prevent it to the extent that you can. But I do think that pain is part of the process. And I love watching motivational videos. I've never had any motivational video of value where the person has said, I started my business and everything was perfect. And I spent $1 on marketing. I got 100 clients, made $10 million. And now I just live on the beach doing nothing. Like, I've never heard that story. And I wish I could, because I want somebody to show me the way. But I think that there are things that you can streamline. And I think mentorship is a big one. Finding people who have been there before and asking what did they do that helped them succeed, and not necessarily trying to replicate that, because everybody's ability to succeed is not dependent on a formula for the most part. You can't just do the exact same steps and it's going to work exactly the same. There's some fortune that falls into that. There's some connections that falls into that, relationships that comes into that. But I think mentorship's a big one. I also think being inspired through motivation, this idea that we are intrinsically motivated at all times is not necessarily so. You can't be on fire at all times. A fire that burns at 100 degrees, 100% the entire time just ends up burning out eventually. And so there are going to be moments where you're not on fire and you need to find that inspiration and motivation. And so I believe reading does that. Reading provides some of that mentorship. It provides some of that story. I believe that listening to motivational things on YouTube or TikTok or wherever, where you can actually get the wisdom of people who have been there before is good for those difficult times. And yes, you can streamline it. Yes, you can use formulas. But there is going to be pain in the process. When I go to the gym, it doesn't feel good. It feels good afterwards. It feels good after many months of training. But in the moment, it's not always going to feel good. The question is, am I going to quit or am I going to get up and keep going? And I think the journey of entrepreneurship is moving past the pain in the midst of the process.
Yeah, it's a growth mindset, right? Like it goes back to, at the end of the day, if you want to achieve whatever you want to achieve in life, you have to have a growth mindset and be willing to have the bumps, the bruises, the muscle tears, whatever analogy you want to give, to achieve that level that you aspire to. And in the example you gave, and correct me if you guys feel like I'm wrong here, but the person who started a business with $1, got 100 leads, did $10 million revenue and made $10 million of profit is probably the most miserable person out there, because they think everything is so easy and it's not, and or they're living the same day every day because they think they have everything, and they're miserable too. But when you work for something, and to your point on you sharing your story, what you're doing today, you feel a lot more fulfilled because of what you had to go through versus if it was just given to you. And I think that's the area too. It's very important for even adolescent education today, right? Is everything given to them, or do they have to work for it and understand that things don't come easy? Because things that are given to people, then they take things for granted. They take success for granted. They don't appreciate it as much as they should. I'm sure that's part of your story, right? And I'm curious, when and how did that transition happen? Because as an example, you said, I had 8 business failures, I had some relationship failures, I had some investment failures. Well, why did it take 8 and not 6 business failures? Or why didn't it take 1 relationship or 2 relationships? When was the breaking point? Was like, okay, this is it. I learned enough. I'm pivoting. I'm making a change. I'm doing this. What was that pivot point for you, whether consciously or unconsciously? Did you take all this, package it up, and move forward?
Yeah, I think for me, it was like a mindset change. And this is important. I don't know how much people do mindset work and stuff, but we are so negative about ourselves and our abilities. Even the most positive person has some inner demon that they're facing when they're at home by themselves as it relates to their abilities. The pivot point for me was when I finally accepted that I was good enough, when I finally accepted that I was deserving of a successful business. It was a very pivotal moment, because I remember the moment where I was like, wait a second, if all these people have successful businesses, why can't I? If all these people have successful relationships, why can't I? If all these people have all these friends, why can't I? And when I realized that I could and should have the same blessings that they had in their life, I started viewing everything differently. I love the phrase that says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at begin to change. Yeah. And I just started to change the way I looked at everything. So the failure was no longer a failure. It was an opportunity. The challenge was no longer a challenge. It was an opportunity. And when I started viewing everything as an opportunity, then real opportunities came my way. I started meeting people that would be meaningful in my life. I started engaging better, and I started looking for the future that was positive and full of growth. And when I started changing that mind, it was amazing how I started viewing everyone differently and the role that they played in my life.
Yeah. And Louis, it's the questions you ask yourself, right? You
Mhm.
could have easily said, why don't I have what everybody has? And just that one word, right? As opposed to,
Mhm.
why can't I have what everybody
Oh,
has, right?
wow. Yeah.
The questions you ask yourself really prepare you for what's going to come. So I love that. Was there anything specifically? Was it a motivational speech? Because you mentioned those have an impact on it. Was it a failure so big that you were soul searching in the forest trying to figure this out? What led to you finally realizing you had to change your mindset? What was that trigger, and or was it a tool? Was it a book? Was it a speaker? Was there anything specifically you recall, or was it just one day you woke up and said, I can do this, I'm going to change my mindset?
I wish it would have been the latter, but no, it was a very specific moment. I had a previous partnership, and it was a law firm partnership. And I walked into their office one January about 7 years ago, and they told me that they no longer wanted to have the partnership, and I was going to be out. And it was that moment where I knew I needed something needed to change. And man, you want to talk about it has to hurt. I had worked there 15 years, and knowing that I was going to have to go out on my own, I was almost forced into it. And that was a pivotal moment for me. So 7 years ago, being today, I can say I was fired from my partnership. It was the pivotal moment that actually made me transition. And it just goes back. The pain is what promotes, it's what takes you to that next level. And so when you start looking at the pain as an opportunity, it really changes everything.
Talk to me about this where when you're talking about the pain and moving past the pain, you're practically a motivational speaker yourself, the way that you speak and some of the words you use and your memory for this stuff. And eh, I believe in that. And it's almost like I can hear Sylvester Stallone saying, it's not how many times you get hit, it's how many times you get up. I
Right.
believe in that. How, when an entrepreneur believes they're making the best decision they can, and they believe that, they execute on it to the best of their abilities, and they fail, and they go make a different decision to the best of their ability, they make a great decision, they go execute on it to the best of their ability, and they fail again. How should someone be thinking of this? What are the tools, the tips, the tricks that when this one more failure comes, that they can get up at least one more time? How?
Man, that's wow. That's a hard, I think it depends on every person, right? Every person is motivated by different things. What I will say is just my background as it relates to how I got up every time. I spent a lot of time reading, a lot of time. I'm a big proponent. I have this challenge called the 52 and 52. Read 52 books in 52 weeks. And I believe within 36 months, you'll double your income. Now, I've had a couple of my employees do it. I've had some friends do it. They've all doubled their income. Many of them have never even finished the 52 and 52. Some of them have read only about 30 or 40. I think reading gives you two things. Number one, discipline. Number two, mentorship. And I've read over 300 books cover to cover, some of them multiple times. I've read, there's this thing called Blinklist. It's an app where you can read a book in 20 minutes. I've done 300 of those as well. So 600 total books that I've read. And every time I read, I was listening to the mentorship of someone who has fallen and gotten up. And that gave me that inspiration. One more time, one more time. One of my favorite motivational speakers is Les Brown. And he tells a story about how a man visited his bedside and the guy was dying, and the ghost told him that here lies the death of all these inventions, of all these opportunities that were wasted. And he realized at the moment that once you die, there's no more opportunity. And so don't die with your opportunity. And they're like, so I loved hearing stuff like that. I loved hearing about the things that he overcame in his life. And so for me, the how was, I'm going to be committed to a certain practice. And that practice is the practice of reading. That practice is the practice of listening to motivational things, of becoming indoctrinated with this idea that no matter how much I fail, I can still get up. And so the more indoctrinated, it reminds me of listening to music. And if anybody out there has ever listened to a song like 20, 30, 40 times in a row, I've done that. I fall in love with the song and I listen to it over and over. And sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that song. That song should be the motivation, right? If you're listening to motivation, you should wake up with that motivation ringing in your ear. And even when you don't feel motivated, you hear that motivation ringing in your ear, like just I can do this. I can get up. I can still get up one more time. And so for me, it was reading, listening to motivation, but also mentorship. I was very fortunate to have three different men in my life who were just powerful mentors to me, who did not make money off what I did. And that was the key. They didn't make money off my business. They had no direct interest in my success at all. In fact, they benefited nothing from my success. And to have those people to lean on and to talk to when I was going through failures was powerful, because I knew I had a support system that was going to help me through the process. So the reading part, the motivational part, the mentorship part, that's how you overcome this, is you stay in a constant state of uplifting music, to go back to the music analogy. You're just always being uplifted, and it's hard to fall if you're always being uplifted.
That seems like a great crescendo to end on. Is there any last message that you want to provide our entrepreneur listeners?
I would just say that entrepreneurship is a journey, and the journey doesn't end when you become successful. It only begins when you become successful, because it's at success that you can truly live the life you were created to live.
Thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
John, on that last part, right before I said, hey, that's a great place to end on that crescendo, man, was he making me think of, I got this visual of feeding motivation almost like being an animal within us. And we have an opportunity to feed it or to starve it. And what he was giving us was just solid gold on how to feed that motivation animal when he was talking about the reading and that challenge, 52 and 52, and you'll double your income in the next 36 months. In listening and getting a mentor and surrounding yourself with a support system, just solid gold on how to feed motivation.
Yeah. There was a guest who brought this up in the past 4 seasons. I can't remember exactly who it was, but the quote was, the solution to pollution is dilution. And what Louis was really talking about is sometimes the pollution is not other people's negativity or other people's trash. Sometimes it's our own. Sometimes it's our own mind playing tricks on us that we're not good enough, that we're an imposter, that you're not meant to have success, that whatever. And that especially happens, Rich, when you experience a moment of failure, whatever that may be. You have self-doubt about everything going on. The solution to that is dilution. And the dilution is really positive messaging. The dilution is motivational speakers. The dilution is reading books, which, by the way, I do subscribe to Blinkist. Do you?
Yes. Actually, I got it from you when you and I did the app swap, whatever it was, 10 years ago. And
that
we
was
did
a long time ago. Maybe not 10.
The Apple
but
app swap.
Yeah. Blinkist is a fantastic tool. You literally can read a book in 15 minutes and get the principles out of it. And you can dive deeper if you want to.
Beyond that, if you're going to talk about Blinkist, it's not just you can read a book in 15 minutes. Yeah. I think it's the only app that will read to you.
Yes. 100%.
So it's almost like having the Cliff Notes, that if you want to read the Cliff Notes, you can. Correct. But it reads the Cliff Notes to you, which is very unique.
Great correction. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to just share on motivational messaging is you can listen to Tony Robbins. You can listen to this motivational speaker, that motivational speaker, and it's helpful. There's no doubt, and you should do it. No question. But where Louis was really going is, what are the questions you're asking yourself? When the motivational speaking is done, when you're done reading the book, what are you asking yourself, and how are you asking yourself those questions? Are they driving you for more? And we shared this offline. I'll share it again. But a good friend of mine who's in the sports mindset performance space shared an idea he had with me today about how athletes, before they go into battle or into their event or on the field or on the ice or whatever it may be, how using AI can record songs or messages to themselves in the voice or tone or thematics of any great artist they like, Eminem or Jay-Z or whomever it may be, giving them the message that they can put in their headphones about how they should go out there and kick some butt today and why they're the best and just giving them that positive reinforcement, that motivational speaking. So there's so many tools available today, Rich, to fill your mind and your energy positively. So you have a growth mindset. I think we're just scratching the surface of that people should start investigating a little bit more, because really at the end of the day, It's the questions you ask yourself that prepare you for the actions you're going to take that particular day. We talked about this with John Mitchell on that podcast, right? The Science of Success. Really, you spend 95% of your time doing things subconsciously.
When you talk about the questions you ask yourself, the thing that my mind immediately jumps to is, I don't remember where I picked it up, but I got taught that when you ask why questions, you're going to get more of what you've done in the past. So when you ask things like, why did that marketing not work? Often what you find out is the tips to it not working. Those are the tips.
Yep.
Or in health and fitness, why am I not able to lose weight? The answer we give ourselves is how to not lose weight. Versus when we just reverse that question and start with a how.
Yep.
So it would be, how can I adjust my marketing to be more successful? How can I determine better who my target market is? How can I have a healthier lifestyle? I often find, and now you can play games with it, but I find this in a natural state. 90% of the time, our why questions are steeped in the past. If we want more of what we've been doing, our how questions are steeped in the future. Generally, it's positive and negative. How is more positive and future-based. Why is more negative. Now, where I say you can play games with this is you can obviously say, why am I so disciplined?
Yeah.
And that's not negative, right? But typically our self-talk isn't going to overthink that. It's going to be, why is a woe is me thing. And you learn how to get the same results that you don't want when you ask a why question.
Sure. But why am I so disciplined is also going to give you historical information,
which would be positive, actually. That's what I'm saying. But our mind doesn't work like that. We don't often ask why questions around something positive. We ask why questions around something around the past. And it's a bad question because it's past based. And what you get are answers on how to continue that state that you don't want when you ask yourself a why question versus a how question. You're talking future state.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. And certainly when we talk through some of the things that Louis talked about with his book, King of Growth, a lot of that really connected with me in a different way. He was talking a lot about marketing principles to grow your business. But the reality is, there are certain ways, and everybody has a different formula, and some people call it principles, and some people call it essentials, some people call it pillars, some people call it something completely different. But there are certain components of growing a business I think Louis is really connected with, which is, if you grow your business the right way, there is a way to have a business which creates a level of wealth and freedom for you, the entrepreneur. And we didn't dive enough into this, Rich, in my opinion. A lot of people create a business so they can have a job. And there's another level of entrepreneurship where you create a business as a passive investment. And I'll give you a really good example. There are 4 types of assets that Rich Dad, Poor Dad talks about, right? There's business assets, there's real estate assets, there's stocks, and then there's commodities. Those are the assets, right? No one ever buys one commodity and says, okay, I'm done. I bought gold. I don't have to do anything else anymore. No one buys one stock. Okay, I bought America Online, I'm done, or Apple, or whatever it may be. They diversify, they have mutual funds. No one really buys, if you want to be a real estate investor, no one really buys one building and goes be the janitor and the property manager and takes the lease checks. No one actually does that if they want to be a real estate investor. But yet entrepreneurs usually have one business. Why? Because they spend 80, 90 hours, they're stressed out, they're overworked, they're underpaying themselves to keep this business going. And there are things you can do. And I'm sure in this 999 plan, Louis shares a lot of them about how you can escape that rat race and build a business asset that's a passive asset. So you can go build other business assets and have a mutual fund of business assets. That to me is magical. And I'd love to dive into that in future episodes with other guests.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for the reminder on that. It reminds me of a quote that sometimes we use, which is, people will finance bad decision making until they can't finance it any longer.
Yes.
Here's what I mean by that is, if somebody has a lower gross margin, let's say, because their labor is going overtime on providing that service or creating a product, it's a bad decision to allow that low gross margin. So if the entrepreneur doesn't want to engage conflict with one of their employees on why they're moving at the pace they are or how they can move more quickly, they're avoiding that conflict. They will continue to finance that bad decision on having a lower gross margin until they don't have enough money anymore.
Yep.
Then they have a decision to make. The decision is, am I going to engage the conflict? Frankly, I should have for a while, or am I going to go out of business?
Yep.
The reason I bring that up is what you're talking about with an entrepreneur having one gig. It's almost like you can finance with time, overthinking some of the decision making as an entrepreneur. And you can finance some of that with your time. If we think of time as the commodity now instead of money, you can finance that time because you have all the time in the world on the one business. But as soon as you start that second or third business, you're going to have to be making higher quality decisions at a faster rate and frankly, be more entrepreneurial because as you and I have said many times on this, being an entrepreneur is really about ready, fire, aim. Let's just get a shot up on the target, see where it lands, so then we can adjust from there. You're going to take a lot more shots as an entrepreneur with more than one venture. Now, I'm not telling every entrepreneur, go get a second deal, but you may want to consider dabbling in something so that it will crunch how much time you have available so that you can make better decisions with less time.
Yeah, love that, Rich. And that kind of brings a couple of points. One is you may not be the best person to run your business. Number one, there may be somebody else in your organization or out there that could run your business a lot better than you could for a lot of different reasons. But then also a lot of people work in their business, not on their business. They're down there chopping the trees versus rising up above the trees and seeing what's going on strategically. And when you can remove yourself from your day-to-day operational component of a business, hire the appropriate person at the appropriate compensation to do that job, you can rise above your business strategically, being more of the chairperson looking over the business and really helping improve strategic plans, direction, analysis of gross margins, how the business can finance its growth, a whole bunch of other things. So there's a lot to unpack there, too much for this conversation. But yeah, it reminded me of a lot of different components we still need to talk about on this podcast.
And it sounds to me like Louis Scott is a really good person to reach out to who will help entrepreneurs really rise above the day-to-day. And as a consultant with experience himself in many businesses, be able to talk about what are those pillars, what are the principles, and what are the essentials.